Hi, it's Paul Guppy with the Washington Policy Center, and this is our regular update about what's going on in Washington State. And this week, I'm going to cover the wrap-up of the legislative session, which has ended already, and now the governor is signing bills. Before we get to that, I want to make sure that I remind everyone to please tell your friends, like, subscribe, and share our videos. We do have a rapidly growing audience, which is exciting to us, and we definitely want to share our news with people around the state or anyone that you know that might enjoy these videos. So please send out the word. Back to the action here. The governor is taking action on reviewing bills that were passed by the legislature. He has 20 days from the end of the legislative session to sign bills. That deadline is coming up on May 20th, so just a few more days from now. He has not yet signed an operating budget, which is key to keeping the government running. The government's fiscal year, as I've mentioned before, starts on July 1st. But there is a deadline when the governor has to authorize this new bill to keep the state government running for the next 2 years. So he will no doubt be doing that. He does have line item veto authority in this state, and there may be sections of the operating budget that Ferguson may decide to change or veto. We'll see how that goes. But in the meantime, let's get to bills that he has signed and also ones that are coming up very shortly that we know that he's going to sign in the next few days, and I'll run through these. And they cover things like what's going on with striking workers, parental rights issues, and I'll just get to it. Why am I listing them? I'll just tell you what they are. So first off is an important bill for agriculture in our state and communities, particularly east of the mountains, and that is, I call it HB 1912. The actual title of the bill at the end of the process is Engrossed Second Substitute House Bill. So that's a mouthful, but effectively what it does is it follows through on a promise that Governor Ferguson made early in the year that he would exempt fuels that are used in agriculture for off-road purposes from the Inslee carbon energy tax. And this is something that the agriculture community expected that they were going to get. Agriculture is already exempt from the gasoline tax. This goes back to the 1930s, and it makes sense that when fuel is used in what is essentially an industrial production, it's not the same as a road use, and therefore they should be exempt. The Inslee signed his carbon energy tax bill, which raised costs for all of us, but it did not include any promised exemption that there were for farmers. Governor Ferguson traveled to the Tri-Cities and signed that bill along with 10 other bills. So he covered a lot of things at once. A couple things struck me about that trip. First, Ferguson, I think, was better at doing his homework, better staff work in traveling to Eastern Washington, because a number of years ago, Jay Inslee traveled to Eastern Washington with a gift of apples for the people of the community that he had brought with him over the mountains, and in doing so, he violated the apple maggot quarantine in the area. He actually broke state law by doing this, the governor did. And apparently he didn't research ahead of time, or the staff didn't, that he actually shouldn't do that. Ferguson appears to be much more careful in the way he operates. The other thing that's interesting about Governor Ferguson is he is reaching out to communities in Eastern Washington. He's not neglecting them. Many of the bills that he signed in the Tri-Cities are Republican-sponsored bills. The agriculture fuel exemption bill was sponsored by Representative Tom Dent. He's from the Ellensburg-Moses Lake area, a Republican, worked with the governor and many Democrats in the legislature and got that passed. That is the kind of governance and policy making that we at Washington Policy Center like to see. Not harsh, mean, and partisan, but the two parties coming together and agreeing on policies that benefit everybody in our state. So we hope that we see more of that. Another piece of good news is that there were 3 bills that were introduced that would have affected the regulation and creation of AI, a cutting-edge new technology. Our ardent techmeister, Donald Kimball, on our staff ferreted this out. He tracked these 3 bills, and they are HB 1622, HB 1168, and HB 1170. All 3 of these, the first one would have required negotiation with the state unions before the state could adopt AI technology. That would have brought everything to a screeching halt. And the others would have provided oversight and mandates on the creation of AI, burdening innovative tech companies from creating this new technology. This reminded us of the fight that went on in the 1990s over the internet, regulating the internet. Congress backed off, thank goodness, and allowed American technology to move forward. The same fight is happening in our state today over AI, the next wave of innovation for the future. And so far, lawmakers in our state, Democrats and Republicans included, have wisely said, let's let this creative process go forward and not smother it with too much regulation. The next issue I'll mention involves SB 5351. Not a major bill. It has to do with dental insurance and coverage there, important to dentists and their patients, but not generally to the whole state, except in one factor. Governor Ferguson, rather, again, followed through on a promise. He vetoed Section 6 of that bill, which provided an emergency clause. This is routine legislation trying to improve an area of dental insurance, and yet lawmakers, in their wisdom, attached an emergency clause to it. And that's in order to make it go into effect right away, to insulate it from voters repealing it, which nobody wants to repeal this anyway. But it signaled another abuse of the emergency clause. State law says that emergency clause are to protect public safety and for the immediate preservation of the government. And bills are passed all the time, like this dental insurance bill, that have nothing to do with those areas, and yet lawmakers put the emergency clause on and to sort of grease the skids and help it go through faster. Ferguson vetoed that. It doesn't have a huge change on the ground. It changes the effective date of the bill from July 1st to July 27th. So no political risk for Ferguson. But what it does do is take a small step in rebuilding trust with the public, which we think is important. And Ferguson has shown initiative in being more bipartisan, keeping promises, commitments that he made back in January, and really trying to follow through with the public on things that he said that he's done. We see that as a good change in style in the way that our state is being governed. Next is a bill that is going to harm our economy. That's SB 5148. Governor Ferguson signed this on May 13th, so it's become law. It's called the so-called middle housing bill. It allows duplexes, quadplexes, larger multifamily housing to be built in single-family neighborhoods. It has a specific clause that calls on the Department of Commerce to punish cities and towns that do too much to protect their traditional single-family neighborhoods. This is phase 2 of the Democrats' effort to ban single-family zoning in our state, and that's why it's a major bill. The problem we see with it is that it takes away that local flexibility. It doesn't respect the traditional nature of many built-up neighborhoods around the state. Seattle and Tacoma are on the cutting edge of density and zoning changes, so they are essentially exempt from this bill. Who is affected? Mostly communities, Spokane and others in the eastern part of the state, that our wise leaders in Olympia decided are too slow in getting rid of single-family housing. The whole issue reminded me of an essay by Virginia Woolf, very famous, that said that in order to be independent, one must have a room of one's own, talking about women and feminism and being independent. But that same attitude applies to everybody in our society. Most people have a goal that they would like to own a house of one's own. Home ownership is the American dream. It's also an economic stepladder. And what people prefer is not a condo, that's fine for some people, but many people want a single family home that is their own, where they own the dirt. And they're making it harder in this state in order to do that. That's why we think Governor Ferguson signing this bill is an important step to watch out for. Next is HB 1296. I've covered that before, about the repeal of the parental rights that the voters passed last year. The Democrats forged ahead and passed this. It is on the governor's desk right now. He will almost certainly sign it. He doesn't dare go against the Democrats in the legislature on this one. I always look at language of the supporters. They say that it's in the title of the bill. It says it's to protect student safety and privacy. So the question is, protected from whom? Basically, parents. So when parents are being treated as a threat, as a danger to their own children, rather than partners in education, that's when the public begins to lose confidence in our public education system and families start to leave the system, and that's another trend that's going on. Next bill is SB 5041. This is the infamous bill that for the first time in history would pay unemployment insurance benefits to unions that go on strike. Union members could get up to 6 weeks of unemployment paid out of the state trust fund. The governor is almost certainly going to sign that bill too in the next few days. And the reason is the political reality in this state that Governor Ferguson or any Democrat cannot dare go against the powerful unions on this issue. Payments for going on strike has been a major goal for unions for a number of years, and they are about to achieve that. Next, I want to close with a national study that was done by the Urban Institute, very respected organization, not a wacky right-wing conservative outfit at all. And they looked at education standards across the 50 states, and they found that Washington ranks 32nd as far as fourth grade reading and math levels. And guess who ranks first? Mississippi. So that is a big change. Mississippi enacted a bill called the Literacy-Based Promotion Act a number of years ago that basically says that no third grader can be promoted to the fourth grade unless they have learned reading and math standard up to that level. Anyone involved in education knows that education is cumulative. You have a foundation for the student, and then they use that to build to the next level. That's why when students fall behind on literacy, their education suffers across the board. Mississippi lawmakers established this standard, and now it is starting to pay off. And we looked at other states that are doing very well, and it's surprising what you would expect. Georgia, Arkansas, Alabama, Louisiana are all part of the group, soon to be joined by Texas, that have adopted school choice, and as a result of that, their education systems are making much more progress than Washington State has. So we generally thought of ourselves as advanced, progressive. We don't have the problems of poverty and the history of racism that other areas of the country have. Those states that used to have a bad reputation on education standards are turning that around and coming out on top. And guess who's slipping? We are. So because we have not adopted school choice, working with parents, building trust, focusing on standards and testing, not doing social promotion for children who are not learning, putting them into education situations that they can't handle, or dropout rate, or woke social issues in the schools, that's another issue. All those factors together are changing the reputation of our state nationally. And we like to be proud of Washington, and advocates here talk about how progressive we are, but basically progressive is coming to mean going backwards, and other states are moving ahead of us. I bring this up because it's a good idea to step back every once in a while and look at the larger picture. The small bills and changes that pass every year have a cumulative effect and are actually degrading the reputation of our state, and worse than that, harming our citizens and students as they try to get ahead and build a good life for themselves. So that's a trend that we're going to keep an eye on. That's our update for this week, and I'll be back in the future with more information. Thanks for watching.
If you found this informative, share it with a friend and consider checking out one of our suggested videos over here. Make sure you're subscribed so that you can stay up to date with the latest policy news from Washington.